if we live presently, how do we ever get to the future? If all we are is in the present moment, if all there ever is the present moment, how do we ever get to the future? How do we get there? And that's when I started to kind of shift my kind of concept of time. And I started to realize that, the way we view time in the West at the moment isn't correct, because we kind of see time as a fixed thing, right? So it's if, the future stretched out in front of you, past is stretched out behind you, and then you're the one moving through it towards the future.
Right.
But, this isn't the case, because you never arrive at the future, because you only ever are in the present moment. So that's when I started to realize that, right, we're not the one moving through time. Time moves through us. The future makes its way towards you. And when you grasp that, you can kind of see what it means to kind of pursue goals presently.
So welcome to the Tea On, where we typically sip tea and we talk about things, preferably things that matter. I actually don't have tea with me. I realize that. So I
have water.
So. You have water? I know, I have water too. Welcome to the Hydration On. I love that for us. I am so excited about today's conversation, the person that I'm having the conversation with, because it particularly is resonant with me when I'm speaking with someone that has impacted my life in a personal way. And for those of you who don't know LukeTherapy, you are the founder of TranscendingThought. And what's iconic is that you've kind of gone a little bit viral on the TikTok, and yeah, you've really, really caught traction there. And what I love about your work is that you have been able, like I was mentioning before, to take these really large concepts and ultimately these transformative, spiritual, and just honestly, like just mental health concepts, and make them in a way that's diluted enough to be digestible, but also applicable. And so I'd love to just kind of explore your thought, your theory, and yeah, before we get into the conversation, if there's anything that you want to say on your behalf, introduce yourself, please feel free to.
So I'm just grateful and excited to be here. Yeah. So I think it's the time, changing your relationship with time, TikTok, that kind of blew up a little bit, which I was, quite shocked about. I think that's the one that probably impacted people the most, which I was really quite, amazingly to see kind of how people responded to that. So yeah, I guess that's the one that I kind of would like to talk about today. I think that's going to be quite a good one.
Oh my God. Yes. That was the one that did it for me. Honestly, that was the first one that I saw from you, but afterwards I followed and I continued to kind of not only really ingest your theories, but apply them. But yeah, I would love to start off with that, because I think that was a concept, and the way that you communicated it with, which I would love for you to do as well right now. But I think it was something that was such an immediate shift that I think was really, really impactful about it, was that it's not something that, okay, well, maybe over time, like it was just in the shift in perception, you were able to immediately feel a difference in your anxiety and the way that you approach the world. And it was something that I really centered, like, moving forward on. So for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, please explain what the concept of that TikTok was.
Yeah. So I was in between sessions of kind of people that I was seeing at work. Yeah. One of them cancelled. So I was kind of just sitting, kind of just being, kind of meditating, just sitting there breathing. And I was just thinking over this concept of kind of living presently, because obviously it's becoming quite mainstream now, this idea of, living in the present moment. Obviously it's not mainstream yet, but it's getting there. I feel like it's becoming a lot more present, a lot more, in culture, in our Western culture. And I was sitting there and I was just thinking, I've experienced such a deep transformational kind of shift in my state of consciousness about a year ago now. It was about a year to the day actually today, I think, which is quite crazy. And I just knew this idea of time and living presently. And I was thinking about, if we live presently, how do we ever get to the future? If all we are is in the present moment, if all there ever is the present moment, how do we ever get to the future? How do we get there? And that's when I started to kind of shift my kind of concept of time. And I started to realize that, the way we view time in the West at the moment isn't correct, because we kind of see time as a fixed thing, right? So it's if, the future stretched out in front of you, past is stretched out behind you, and then you're the one moving through it towards the future. Right. But, this isn't the case, because you never arrive at the future, because you only ever are in the present moment. So that's when I started to realize that, right, we're not the one moving through time. time moves through us. The future makes its way towards you. And when you grasp that, you can kind of see what it means to kind of pursue goals presently, because you see that you're the fixed one. Sorry, that was my Siri that came up there. You're the fixed one in time. You're the fixed present awareness, and then time moves through you. The future makes its way towards you. And the reason why that's so life-changing is because if you view yourself moving through time, the cause of stress is when you try to leave the present moment. So if you see a future goal that you want, and that's what every single person does, the mind creates an image in the future of you with lots of money, your dream job, your relationship that you want, all of those things that you really want. But then you see yourself trying to claw your way out of the present moment towards that future that you want, but you can't leave the present moment. It's physically impossible. There's nothing that you can do. So when you grasp that and you can see, I can't leave the present moment, all of that stress releases itself from you, because you see you never will leave the present moment. The future will make its way towards you. It's the future's job to come towards you, and it's your job to rest in the present moment, do what you can in the present moment, and that's it. And then the future that you want will come to you as long as you're focusing on it. That's the general concept, and I think that subtle shift is so effective, and that's the reason why I think it has so much effect on people on TikTok, and why it's so powerful is because that feeling that I'm talking about there, and the feeling that most people felt, is presence. That's what that is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the,
No, go ahead, finish.
So that's kind of the states that kind of, of presence that we're kind of coming into now in terms of the West. Kind of the East have been, they've been aware of this for ages, and we just haven't been able to listen to it because we've been identified with the mind, identified with ego, and we're starting to awaken now. We're starting to come out. And that subtle shift of changing your relationship in that way, seeing time moving towards you, seeing the future making its way towards you, grounds you into the present moment. And then you focus all of your attention into life itself, which is this moment right now, because that's all there ever is, and that's all there ever will be. It's all you ever have. Everything else is just thought.
Exactly, that's it. And I just, oh my God, if I could just get every word that you just said like tattooed on my body, like the entire monologue just like on my back, because it's so, I think the reason why it was such an immediate shift for me was because it was like permission. It was a permission to stop exhausting myself by chasing. And I have so much to say, but the first thing that I want to ask is, upon sort of like realizing this concept, did you have to in any way shift your definition of what you wanted to attain, right? Because I think that sometimes we can get into that chasing mode when we see success or peace as kind of like this objective external thing. And I realized that when you kind of are your own garden that you nurture and allow time and like the bees to kind of arrive to you, those concepts tend to change and it becomes an energy or a feeling rather than a thing. And so I'm curious to know if you've had that experience or did that shift for you at all?
So I am very aware now that nothing of this material world will ever satisfy you. That's just a truth of life. And for a lot of people, I feel very lucky that I got to experience that. For most people, what happens, sorry, my Siri keeps coming up.
You're perfect.
For most people that go through life, those words that I've just said, nothing on this material world will ever satisfy you. They don't hear it.
Yeah.
And they can't hear it. They're kind of just thinking, okay, I'll find out for myself. So they're going to keep clawing their way towards what they want, the money and things like that. The most fundamental thing you can do for your state of happiness, for your state of peace, is to realize that nothing of this material world, this external world, will satisfy you, not for any length of time. Because particularly if you're constantly looking to the future, because if you're looking to the future, that means you're seeking. To seek means to not have. And the thing that people want is a feeling of abundance, a feeling of gratitude, and a feeling of enough. That's what people are looking for. So all the time people are seeking it, they're never going to find it, because you can't find a feeling of enough. It's only something you can decide for yourself, I'm enough now. So in terms of me kind of working towards the future, that was the first shift I had to make, was that nothing of this material world is ever going to satisfy me. Everything that I am, everything that I need is here now, because that's all there ever will be. And then that's when that kind of, you can start, that's when you can start moving towards goals, or rather letting goals come towards you and start working on them. That's when you can start doing that. But you have to just realize that it's never going to satisfy you. Even if you make £1 million, if you make £100 million, it's never going to be enough. And you always look for more if you haven't found that part of you that I sometimes call, and we sometimes call in spirituality, presence and awareness and, presence. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's a scary concept for people to conceptualize, because I think we've kind of been taught to resource so much of our validation from external things and achievements and titles, right? And so I think to alleviate yourself from sort of awaiting an arrival of something in order to kind of exhale and feeling like enough, it leaves you in this scary place of like, what happens when I'm my sole resource of worth, and when it's an energetic thing rather than a tangible good. And so I think it's a scary truth to live in, but ultimately I think it's the key. And so, but what I'm so curious to know, because you've mentioned this a couple of times already, is that like Western culture, honey, is we're getting there, right? But we're just now beginning to digest concepts that have been around for eons in the Eastern culture. And so what I think made me gravitate so much towards your work was because it seemed to be this integration of philosophy, of spirituality, and even psychology. And I would love to know your take on how the mainstream media, particularly in the Western world, is now approaching spirituality, because I watch it be something that is so beneficial, especially to this younger generation, but also there's a weird way that it's been watered down and diluted. And I think like there's this hyper focus on like undoing our traumas, but I find that you can constantly be in this energetic space of what happened to me that you are. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, what's your take on that?
So I've got my master's in clinical psychology. I was working towards becoming a clinical psychologist for a long time, and my main work is kind of cognitive behavioral therapy. And I feel now cognitive behavioral therapy, the most mainstream Western mode of treatment for mental health problems, is a very watered down version of spirituality and kind of spiritual teachings, because CBT focuses on changing your negative beliefs and negative thinking patterns to more positive thinking patterns. And the term that I call transcending thought just means to just stop identifying with them, just let them go, move attention away from them, and just become completely grounded in the present moment. And when you kind of do that, the thoughts don't have any hold over you. And that's the cause of the majority of human suffering. It's human thinking. That's what causes suffering. It's incessant and consistent negative thinking. That's the basic cause of depression, basic cause of anxiety. It's incessant thinking. That's why CBT works so well. But, transcending thought, the term that I use, is so much simpler, because it just means become aware of your present moment, move identification away from the thoughts, and just become aware of your breath, become aware of your surroundings, stop listening to the voice in the head, and just sit and be and live presently. And when you do that, the thoughts in your mind can't affect you anymore. And that's what I feel we're kind of moving towards now in terms of psychology. I can see it coming, and that's where I want to head towards. I'm creating a new therapy called cognitive detachment therapy, which means to step out of thought. I feel like it's so much simpler. We're still in the early days there, but that's what I'm kind of working on at the moment, and I feel like that's where psychology is moving towards.
Yeah.
And to just pick up on another point that you said, I think it's really important to always remember where this knowledge has come from. It's come from the East, because I feel very strongly at the moment that we're taking this knowledge from the East, kind of bringing it into the West, we're repackaging it, and we're forgetting where it came from, which is, the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most amazing spiritual books in the world. And I think that's one of the biggest books that's caused Western spirituality to kind of form, and we're forgetting that. And I think that's so important, because that's where it just becomes, that's just colonization and all of that Western stuff. I'm aware that I'm a white man and I'm preaching spirituality, and I'm very aware that that's a big part of what I want to bring into that, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want it to stop me from kind of sharing these things, but I'm also aware We need to not do that. We can't let that happen, because that's where all of this knowledge has come from years from the Eastern cultures of meditating and exploring these aspects of themselves. I think it's so important. I think that's such a big, important thing when talking about spirituality in the West.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for if anything, platforming your voice to also bring awareness of like the roots of it. So I have Bhagavad Gita right there, and it's like, it's so funny how sort of like these Instagrammable, gorgeous little quotes that people post. It's like when you really like sort of climb down the ladder to where it stemmed from, it's right there. And I have it next to a book called What We May Be. And it's one of my favorite books because it kind of explores psychosynthesis. And it's funny because I was watching something that you posted relative to labeling, and just this idea of, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about it, but this idea of sort of, in psychosynthesis, they talk about subpersonalities and how we can kind of have so many layers of us that exist, and the different voices that stem from them and the situations that stem from them. And it reminded me a lot of what you were speaking about. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how we can relate to how we label ourselves versus our experiences, and how to set ourselves free from that.
So it's my belief that labels, so I'll talk you through my interpretation of kind of spirituality at the moment. It's a TikTok that's coming out tonight. I've just made it, so I'm going to post that tonight. Which will be good. So essentially what's happened is what I call life energy, or what we can call consciousness. That's kind of Eckhart Tolle's consciousness, that sort of stuff. Consciousness has manifested itself into this physical world and fallen asleep. And it's become attached to labels and roles and jobs and a name and a body and memories and all of these things that become attached to what I call life energy. And part of that is the labels. So the labeling of the roles that you have. I'm a brother, I'm a psychologist, I'm all of these different things. They're the roles that gets attached to this life energy. In order to realize what's happening there, you have to be able to connect with that part of yourself that is the formless life energy that we can call consciousness. When you grasp that, you can experience consciousness in its purest state. And when you're in touch with that, you can see that all of these things of labels and roles and all of these things that become attached to life aren't you. So when people label you as bad, as a bad person, whatever it is, right? They're just labels that become attached to consciousness, and consciousness in its purest state is love, peace, stillness. That's our natural state. That is the ocean of which we've come. So we are the ocean. So if we take the ocean as consciousness, we are one small droplet from that ocean that's come out and formed a self, formed an individual self. And it's been attached to all of these roles and labels and all of these things. But that droplet of water is ultimately the ocean. It always has been, and it always will be. So we've manifested into this world. We've formed a self. Sometimes that self is a really bad thing for lots of people, but that ultimately we're not the self that we've been identified with. We are consciousness. We are life energy. And then when all of these things become stripped away, when we die, that life energy will go back to where it came from and come out again somewhere else. And it's also the thing that's manifesting itself in trillions of other life forms right now. It's the life energy that's in you. It's the life energy that's in me, in our pets, in the flowers, in the trees. That's all there is. It's life energy manifesting itself all the time. And when you can really grasp that, the labels that cause people so much suffering, that's what we call cognitive distortions, labeling. It causes people so much suffering. It doesn't affect you anymore, because you can see I'm not the label that's become attached to me, I'm life. And that's one of the, when you grasp that concept, all of the thinking errors, we call them in psychology, cognitive distortions, in kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, they don't affect you because you're not making them anymore, because your life energy, and the labels can't touch you when you're identified with that part of you.
Oh my God, how liberating that is, right? And I think you begin to sort of see just the oneness that this all is, and like you were saying, the flowers, just the present awareness of the vibrancy and the love that emits from everything. You're part of it, and every human is a mirror, and every situation is sort of like an energetic communication. It just, you are so inherently, and you know, I'm curious to know, as someone who is just so spiritually aware, so wise, like, where do you relate to your own humanity? Like, do you let yourself kind of like also enjoy beers and like anxiety? Like, where do you balance it?
Such a good point. So I do still experience anxiety. It still arises in me sometimes. You know, I still get these feelings and things like that. I'm not identified with them anymore, you know, these sorts of things. So anxiety will come up. The anxiety's here. I kind of feel it in the chest. I guess the best term is within the anxiety. I'm kind of within it, I'm around it, I'm surrounding it, but I'm not it. I'm the one observing it. That's one of the biggest grasps I've ever had, is that I'm not the anxiety, I'm the one observing it. So when anxiety comes up, I'll sit with it, I'll let it be there, I'll let it come through and come out, but I'm just the one kind of sitting back from it and kind of allowing it to be and come through. It doesn't affect you as much when that happens. And yes, I like a beer, I still live my life, I still do all these things, see friends, go on nights out. I don't drink as much as I used to since this, just because I've noticed, I don't know if you felt it as well, when you drink alcohol, the presence kind of comes down a little bit, and you kind of go back into a little bit of identified with the mind a bit more. That's kind of what the alcohol does. That's why people use it to numb their minds. But yeah, I still live my life. I still do things that I like. I spend lots of time sitting and being, but I don't do things anymore in terms of, not too much anyway, in terms of goals and kind of looking ahead. And that's kind of what a bigger part of my life was. It was I wanted to become a big clinical psychologist, but before my shift in consciousness, I was like, that's what I want. I want the letters DR in front of my name, doctor, just because that means something for some reason, right? And I've kind of just, all of that's come away now, and I'm just living life. And that's ultimately, when you grasp it, you see that's the whole meaning of life. It's just to live, to enjoy it, to be. But you can only really grasp that when you step out of identification with the mind, with the ego, and to be that present awareness.
Yeah, totally. I think spirituality feeds more richness into experiencing your humanity. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So before I let you go, I think one thing that would be really beneficial to anyone listening is, what are some tangible steps that they can take on a day-to-day to sort of begin to live this liberated life, detached from thought, you know, in a way that they can begin moving towards that?
So the most fundamental spiritual practice that you can adopt is, and it's why I called it the term transcending thought, because I think it's the big thing that people struggle with living presently, is they try and think their way into the present moment. You can't do that. You can't think about the present moment, because when you're thinking about it, you're not experiencing it. You're lost in thought again. So, it's like trying to describe the color blue to someone. You can't describe it. You have to tell someone to go outside and look up at the sky. That's what blue looks like. That's the process. And it's why so many people miss what it means to live presently. So the most fundamental spiritual practice is to observe that voice in your head, because so many people don't even know that it's there. That incessant and consistent chatting away of the mind from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. For everyone, they're completely identified with this voice, and they don't even know it's there because they think it's them.
Right.
Like when you're dreaming and you don't know you're dreaming. Only when you wake up and you look back down on the dream and you think, I was dreaming. That's what people are living their life. They're lost in the dreams of the mind. Only when you realize that voice isn't me. I'm not the one thinking. The thoughts are happening to me. I'm not the thoughts. I'm the one hearing the thoughts. When you grasp that, you can step out of thoughts and you can reconnect as the awareness of thoughts. That awareness is who you fundamentally are. So the ultimate spiritual practice is to consistently remind yourself that that voice isn't you. So whatever it's saying, as often as you can, just remind yourself, who said that? Who said that? It wasn't me, right? These thoughts are just coming up and it's not me. I'm not choosing to think them. And if you do think that you're trying to think them, try and stop it. Just for 10 minutes, try and stop it. You can't, not for many people. It just carries on going. So that's the kind of basic awakening for so many people, I think, is to realize that that voice isn't you. It's what we can call ego. And that's the kind of, I think, the main spiritual practice. And that's why I've termed it kind of transcending thought for me, is because it's a lot more helpful for me to fall out of those patterns of trying to think my way into the present moment. What it actually means is to just stop thinking or stop identifying with thought. That's the kind of basic premise there of spirituality, really, is to just stop identifying with thoughts. The moment you do that, you're aware. Yeah.
And it births so much beauty. I think I've really strengthened my sense of self-worth and self-love the more that I've witnessed my thoughts rather than become them or drown in them. Even yesterday, like envy came up for me because there was someone telling me about something that I'm so happy for them, but it also represents something that I desire in my life. And I watched myself think a thought of envy, and I kind of like met the thought, and I was like, hey, no. That's not something that stems from core or soul. That's just kind of a response, a reaction, an emotion, and it's not me. And facing it and allowing it to teach you and inform you rather than to be it. Because at other times I would demonize myself of like, am I a jealous person? And so I say all that to say I think that's an incredibly transformative concept. I think all of your concepts are transformative, and I think what's just gorgeous about your work is that it's unique and true to you. You're like coining terms rather than just like reiterating what everyone else is saying to get like some Instagram likes. And so with that, because I want to give people space to find you and to work with you, if you can not only talk about transcending thought, but also cognitive detachment therapy, because I think that's something that's uniquely yours. And let the people know where they can find you and what they can do to work with you.
Yeah, so transcendingthought.com/free chapters. You can get a free chapter of a book that I'm writing that's hopefully be coming out later this year. And TikTok's my main platform, so that's LukeTherapy on TikTok. I'm on Instagram as well, LukeTherapy. And transcendingthought.com is kind of the home of cognitive detachment therapy, which simply helps people to step out of the thoughts and into the present moment. The moment you step out of thought and into the present moment, that's synonymous with peace, abundance, joy, love, happiness, stillness, all of these amazing emotions of, our natural state. That's our natural state is love, peace, joy, happiness, stillness. And we've become lost in the mind because it's so elusive and so powerful. So Transcending Thought, we're helping people to step out of the mind into the present moment, because we found very clearly that it's something that you can be helped, right? That's the whole purpose of a spiritual teacher and a spiritual counselor, is to take people that are a bit farther behind on the journey, towards spirituality and things like that, and we can kind of accelerate it a little bit. That's the process of cognitive detachment therapy, and it's formed from the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy. As I say, I feel like that's a little bit watered down version of what we've called cognitive detachment therapy.
Oh, incredible. Thank you so much for standing.
You're welcome.
And honestly being the integration of a philosophy of spirituality and psychology in a way that's so unique, and I think ultimately so fucking transformative for a generation that just needs your voice. So thank you for sitting down with me. To everyone watching, definitely follow his work in all the ways that you can, and just walk through life awake and aware and presently, and try to plant yourself in the gorgeousness of what you are experiencing, learn from the contrast. Just do your best, homies. That's all. Beautiful.